Another Juventus manager's fired. What's next for Weah and McKennie? Which nations have qualified for World Cup 2026 so far, and which ones might be banned from traveling to the competition? And we try to find the source of the Gio Reyna to Italy rumors. That and more on Wednesday's Morning Kickaround. Hello and welcome to the show. This is Morning Kickaround, where we cover the world's favorite game from the world's favorite country, coming to you live each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm Robert Kerr. He's Jason Davis. Thank you for joining us here this morning. How you doing, Mr. Davis?
I'm good. We're the most chat happy country. We like our chats in this country. If you like to dive into those group texts, just sharing emojis and stuff. That's what we do as a country. I'm on board. Let's go.
The whole meaning of digging into your friends' group chats and revealing their true selves has gone to a whole nother level. You never know what you'll find in those.
I'm just saying, be careful who you add to your group chat. Double check. You don't want to be adding people to your group chat. You don't want in there. You don't want them to be seeing what you're talking about with your friends behind their back, or maybe information they're not supposed to know. That's all I'm saying. It's just a general guide for life. A little advice from your friends at Morning Kickaround.
I mean, we've all, in haste, maybe texted the wrong person back or replied all to an email, but a whole nother level this week. Have you ever done that, Jason? Sent a slightly inappropriate message to the wrong person?
I don't recall ever having stepped in it like that. No, I managed to avoid those pitfalls, but and I don't think it's because I'm necessarily careful. It's just maybe luck. Been lucky for my entire online life. And may it continue. Soccer gods, take care of me.
May luck rain down on you forevermore, Mr. Davis. We got a great show here on Wednesday. We're going to talk Juventus, World Cup qualification. There's a women's national team roster. We've got a great guest segment at the top of the hour, and we're going to round it off by doing a little bit of sleuthing about Gio Reyna. But in the meantime, thank you for tuning in, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe to the Morning Kickaround YouTube channel. The numbers are doing great. We're knocking down some goals, working towards a pretty hefty goal of 5,000 subscribers. So please be the next and tell your people to be the next after you. You can follow us on social media at Kickaround on X, Instagram, Blue Sky. Write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com. Or if you have some bucks you want to throw to the show, you want to see us become more sustainable and continue our growth, coffee.com/morningkickaround. You can do a one-time donation, something regularly scheduled, like a monthly thing, big, small, it is up to you. And there's even a bonus content segment there for anyone who contributes. So let's get right into it. Let's kick off the show with long balls here on Morning Kickaround. Long ball number one here on Morning Kickaround on Wednesday, March 26th. A pair of American players have a new boss when they get off the plane from the Nations League. Weston McKennie and Mr. Weah, their head coach, Thiago Motta, lasting less than a season. He's ousted as coach of Juventus. Where does that lead the two American stars here as they return from international break?
I mean, imagine that you have the crushing disappointment of having lost to Panama and Canada in the Nations League. You're Weston McKennie, you're Tim Weah. I mean, at least Tim Weah had a nice moment setting up a goal, sort of a secondary assist with the Diego Luna, Patrick Agyemang thing. I don't know that
one
Weston
moment
McKennie,
of quality in the whole international window, right?
I mean, I don't think Weston McKennie was all that great, but that we're not reliving that disappointment. But you get off the plane, you're back in Turin. Maybe all you want is a big bowl of Italian pasta, and you get word. Oh yeah, your boss, the manager, the gaffer, Thiago Motta, sacked after what? I mean, he's been on the job to begin the year after leading Bologna to some success last season. picked as the guy meant to lead Juventus into this new era as they kind of try to scramble their way back up to the top of Italian football. Not ideal. I'll throw in a couple details. Apparently, the guy who effectively runs Juventus, the director, Cristiano Giuntoli, told Thiago Motta, this is a report out of Turin, that he was ashamed at having chosen Thiago Motta. Why are you going to stab the man on the back as he's heading out the door, Robert?
That's a pretty brutal, exit interview quote there. That's pulling no punches. I don't know. Is that alleviating himself from leadership, or is that like taking the blame? Is that good leadership or bad leadership to trash the guy and saying it was my bad?
I think it's pretty poor leadership. We're going to see. So Igor Tudor takes over. And a little bit of history at Juve, having played there, having been an assistant. So there's at least some familiarity. Igor Tudor played there is what I'm saying. Okay. That's what I was that was the sentence I was completing. Obviously, that does not necessarily mean that he knows Weston McKennie all that well or Timothy Weah all that well. Both these guys have proven valuable. Now, it is in the context of Juventus underachieving relative to their expectations. And this is the catch-22 of this, right? Are Weston McKennie, Timothy Weah, they are established enough? Are they good enough players that they have to be in the team no matter who's in charge of Juventus, and they're players who can help Juventus achieve what they want? Or are they part of the problem because everybody's part of the problem at Juventus? And you can't fire all the players, so what do? You fire the manager. I would say that if we're going on history, we're going on the available evidence, Robert, I believe that Weston McKennie will prove his value to Tudor or whoever is next for Juventus.
Yeah, for context, this is going to be his 4th Juve manager, I believe.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's been the outskirts and worked his way into, important squad / penciled in starter for most of those coaches over their tenures.
And think about this. Think about the perspective of it. As American soccer fan, unless you're a Juve fan, for American soccer fans, we watch what's happened with Weston McKennie under Thiago Motta, and we go, oh, look at how great Weston is at ingratiating himself to managers. Here he's done it again with Thiago Motta, and he's so invaluable that Motta keeps finding ways to use him in various places on the field. Now, the other side of that, though, if you're a director of Juve, Giuntoli, or if you're a fan of Juve, who has been critical of Motta or certainly doesn't like the way that the season has gone, then you will say, oh, that's an indication Thiago Motta had no idea what he was doing. If he's constantly moving Weston McKennie around the field, yeah, maybe that's a nice weapon or a nice tool to have. But wouldn't you rather have a manager who goes, here's my team, this is how we play, we do this and we win games, and Weston McKennie's role is defined as X, Y, or Z, because you are only going to get better and only be able to play at a high level or a high enough level to help Juventus to what they want to achieve if you are consistently playing in the same spot. Repetition, knowledge, understanding of what your role is. Timothy Weah has been pushed back to wing back under Motta. I'd be interested to see if that continues. He is not that player for the U.S. men's national team, or hasn't been traditionally, but after witnessing Yunus Musa struggle to play that position in this last window, maybe it's something that Mauricio Pochettino needs to consider. If we're talking about confidence level, how do you feel about Weston McKennie having to go through this again and maybe Tim Weah's role in the team moving forward? I'd say my confidence for McKennie is high. Just based on history, I have to believe. I have no reason to doubt. There's always going to be a little concern when a new manager comes in. But my confidence in Weston McKennie is high. Timothy Weah, a little less so. I think he's a good player, and I think he'll have a role. But will he remain a starter under Tudor or whoever is next when Juventus comes out of the summer window and has to reckon with a wasted season, at least by their estimation? And I'll throw this in too. This could affect one or both players. My understanding is that because they fired Motta and because of his contract, that will hit the books in a pretty negative way, and they may have to make up a 30 million euro shortfall. And we're talking about a couple players that, if you put them together, probably worth more than 30 million. And it not saying that they will be the ones sacrificed. And there's players like Koopmeiners and others who came in, Douglas Luiz, who came in and did not do well under Motta, who could be sacrificed instead. But it is something to keep an eye on.
There's a good article on ESPN FC.com. Italian expert Gab Marcotti listed 8 reasons for the justification of this, and amongst them, reason 7, confusion. Tim Weah has played in 5 different positions, ranging from right back to center forward. Weston McKennie has played 6 different roles. Lloyd Kelly, originally signed as a central defender, has been moved over to left back. So there's a lack of clarity for what Motta was even trying to do. So perhaps,
Yes.
I mean, it's good to have a Swiss Army knife within the ranks, but at some point you have to have like some sort of magnetism to one spot. What is your ideal? You got to have some sense of importance of what your primary role is.
It just speaks to the lack of a clear plan. Like, it just speaks to a lack of not having a handle on how to get the most out of your team when you're moving pieces all around. Now, if he had established a sort of consistent level of success, if Juve was in second place and he was moving players around the pitch all the time, no one would say, "Oh, this is terrible. What are you doing, Thiago?" They would say, "Okay, this is working." That's the thing. The analysis is based on the results. And if the results aren't good enough, and maybe they're not disastrous for Juve, I mean, they're certainly not AC Milan's results, but if they're not what Juve wants, then you have to look at it and say, well, Thiago Motta is just scrambling here, right? He's treading water. He's just throwing, I'm going to use every metaphor possible. He's throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks, Robert. And right now, it clearly didn't stick well enough for him to keep his job.
It sure didn't. Do you think that it's kind of wild that I think he had 42 games in charge, didn't quite figure out his plan? Are we being too harsh on international managers for only having a handful of games and not knowing their lineup? If there's, top club managers that have, 6 months week in, week out with them?
I mean, you're opening a big can of worms that I don't know I'm prepared to dive into. I would say on the surface, yes, but I would need to talk about it a lot more than just say yes. I mean, international managers need to strip down and simplify. That is the nature of the job because of the limited time you get with your team. Thiago Motta has his team out on the training pitch every single day. Should absolutely know better. And you can't say, well, if he doesn't know, then how could an international manager know? Plenty of club managers figure it out. Otherwise, we wouldn't have good teams. So,
Maybe just a note when considering Pochettino. But with international ball in mind, we move on to long ball number 2 here on Wednesday, March 26th. Last night, Argentina beat Brazil 4-1 without one Leo Messi, but they'd already qualified based on other results there in South America. So there are a number of teams that have already qualified. Brazil, they're in 4th in South America, 10 points behind table-topping Argentina, still in the run for it. But so far, teams that have qualified for World Cup 2026, hosts USA, Mexico, Canada, and then now we've learned Japan is in there, New Zealand is in there, Argentina is in there, and interestingly enough, Iran is in there. So Iran, coming to North America next year.
yeah, that it seems uncomfortable, doesn't it? I mean, it doesn't seem like Iran is necessarily a welcome guest in the United States these days. And I will bring in something that James Knowlton posted to social media. You can follow him. This is his Blue Sky account. He writes for a number of places on world football. Iran qualified for the 2026 World Cup, but may have trouble entering the United States for the tournament. As mentioned in his Morning Star article, Trump's government has since proposed a list of 41 countries for U.S. travel bans, which is likely to affect some African qualifiers as well. And then he's got a list of the countries that are sort of involved in qualifying who could make the World Cup, who are on the list of 41. Sudan, Cameroon, Burkina Faso, Cape Verde, Congo, and Venezuela. Now, some of these are clearly political, right? Some of them are really based on ideology and just a disagreement with the people in charge. Some of them are, some of these countries do have terrorist elements within them. Without to get too deep into the politics and the global situation right now, it just is a problem. Like you're saying, hey, we're having a party and everybody's invited. And then right before people show up to the door, they're like, everybody's invited. People show up to the door and you're like, yeah, actually, no, you can't come in. How far did you come? Oh, you traveled thousands of, no, you're not allowed to come in. I'm sorry. You have to go back. And it's not just the teams, right? Obviously, James is pointing out Iran would have trouble traveling if this ban is in place because it would apply to all Iranians, regardless of whether they are players or not. And maybe Iran isn't the first country you think of in terms of traveling support to a World Cup, but lots of countries are going to travel. And let's expand this beyond just these countries who might be affected by a travel ban. What about countries that do not have travel bans, where their governments have issued advisories about people traveling to the United States because of some high-profile incidents we have already seen?
Yeah, because with every action, there's a reaction. We're not the only one banning people. I
mean, they're saying it's not just that. They're saying, hey, don't go to the United States because a French doctor got detained at the checkpoint because he had criticized the president in past social media posts, or somebody's wife or husband is related to Palestinian protests or has spoken out positively about Palestinian plights. I mean, again, without even really making it about my opinion on all of this stuff, there is a practical problem when you have a government that is saying, we're putting bans in place, we're restricting travel, we're doing all these very aggressive things with our borders. Oh, but we're also having the world's biggest party. And I still don't understand how Gianni Infantino, and maybe he's trying to massage the situation, Robert. Maybe every time he walks into that Oval Office and takes another photo with the president, his goal is to soften the president up on some of these things for the World Cup. But it's kind of hard to imagine a world based on the first couple of months of this administration where they go, you know what? The World Cup's coming. Can we just cancel all that stuff for a couple months? Like, well, we're going to stop. Like, just the World Cup's here. It's only a month long. We'll just take all those bans away. Because if your ideology, if your perspective, if your political stance is these people shouldn't travel to our country because they represent a threat, you can't just willy-nilly take that ban off or let them in the country, because how do you defend that if you're saying we're guarding against threats?
Yeah, but you say willy-nilly to kind of like provide waivers, so to speak, to the players and the fans coming to a specific event. But I feel like if we've learned anything over the last like weeks and couple months here, is willy-nilly is part of the nature of what is going on.
Yeah,
and then something at the top, you could be like, this general group of people know, but you guys are the special ones. You are the team that do that. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to like divide the two of the generality of the nationality and in the specifics.
Maybe to get away with this. Well, but that's the thing. Like there's not even there's further things that are happening that are going to limit our ability as a country to vet the people who want to come into the United States for the World Cup. So even if you're not on the ban list, even if your country's not on the ban list, even if none of that stuff, processing those people, vetting those people, going through the visa process is already impacted, right? So again, it feels like we're trying to have a giant party. We said everybody was invited, and I know that wasn't technically true, and there were always some limits on travel for certain people and from certain countries. But you have obviously raised that bar and created a much bigger wall for travel into the United States, and then we're going to say, well, this is an expression. Look how great this World Cup is, but there aren't that many fans traveling. It's not. Again, what's the point of doing this if you're not going to have the party that we all expect around the World Cup? It becomes like a private show for just Americans. And I don't know, as much as I love the diversity of our country and every team that's in that World Cup is likely to have some support, you also want the Dutch fans traveling across the country, or across the water. You also want the English fans to a point to show up. Sorry. Look,
I can hear the drums and the trumpets now.
Yeah, Aussies are great and all those things. I mean, certainly the Japanese, having already qualified, would love to see big support for that team as they arrive for the World Cup in 2026. There's a lot of things to figure out, and it's just, you could sort of make the argument that this is all alarmist more than a year out, but this is when things have to start happening. Like, we're going to get to a point where the window is too short for all these things to be figured out.
On top of that, the three host nations, we're talking about teams traveling from abroad, qualifying teams. The three host nation teams, the Canada, USA, Mexico, not necessarily on the greatest of terms anyway. And there's stories about Canadians having trouble getting back to Canada. So if you are a fan, even if you wanted to see a game in the USA and then see another game in Toronto, where does that leave you? Some sort of technicality, and you're in trouble, and the whole experience is out the door.
I think it would be ridiculous to assume based on what we're watching, that there will suddenly be a door opened and, oh, yeah, Iran and your national soccer team totally come in. No big deal. I just think that is silly to imagine is going to be a simple thing to figure out. So here we are.
And in the comments here, Crispy Do 44. If footballers can't have tattoos for gang suspicion, that's in an individual basis. There's people getting kind of earmarked or red flagged due to tattoos that are linked to this or that. And we know professional footballers get tattoos as well. I don't know if that's the exceptional other sort of a rule coming in that like, oh, you're a soccer player, don't worry about it. But that could also depend on where those individual players are coming from, but
all that too.
A whole other layer to add to that.
And I don't know exactly who he's talking about here, but I'm gonna, just for the sake of making a point, I'm gonna assume this might be Cristiano Ronaldo because he seems to have avoided travel to the United States at every turn since a high-profile case in Nevada for something that happened a very long time ago, and without kind of diving into that and whether people are guilty or not, whatever, it does feel like maybe he has so and Ronaldo's still playing. He just helped Portugal get through in the Nations League in UEFA. He's 40 years old, but he doesn't show any signs of stopping. Is Portugal going to say, no, you can't come with us to Cristiano Ronaldo, the most famous player the country has ever had? Man, this is not true if you eliminate the people who process the visas.
They're
Scott,
already backed up.
saying.
There's already a big delay, and a lot of the ticket availability won't come online until after the Club World Cup, so that window narrows even more so. If
people buying tickets without visas is a scary proposition. Don't tell me that that's not a problem. Who's going to want to spend hundreds of dollars on tickets for the World Cup if they can't be sure they're going to get a visa, whether because of where they come from or just the fact that it might take a long time for that to work?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, a year to go, we'll see what is put into action, or if there's inaction, and it'll be interesting to follow to see the lead up to World Cup 2026. Long ball number 3 here on Wednesday, March 26. United States women's national team roster for April games has been rolled out, and probably the big headline from it: Trinity Rodman, the American superstar, back in the lineup. USA will face Brazil on April 5th at SoFi. I think SoFi is becoming a theater of nightmares. And then April 8th at PayPal Park against Brazil as well. So 2 games in early April coming up, and Trinity Rodman back in the lineup.
Yeah, look, they're friendlies. I mean, when it comes to the U.S. women's national team, friendlies still exist, first of all. The United States men's national team can barely play friendlies. They do have Turkey and Switzerland ahead of the Gold Cup this summer. So that's something to look forward to, I guess. But Brazil is obviously a challenge and a good team, and so these will be interesting. But like you said, it's the story of Trinity Rodman coming back into the team. First time since the Olympics. She was dealing with the back stuff. She obviously helped the Spirit make a final in the NWSL last season, which ultimately they were unable to triumph in. I think elsewhere here, you got a couple of new faces, players with no caps or limited caps. Valentulis Joyce, who's playing goalkeeper for Manchester United these days, is uncapped. Avery Patterson of the Houston Dash is also uncapped. I'm scanning here. You have Claire Hutton, who has 1 cap. I mean, still very new to this team. Michelle Cooper, who's only got 2 caps from the current. She's in the team as well. I'm again, continuing development of Catarina Macario's role in this team under Emma Hayes because she was obviously injured and missed out on some big moments. Is she going to be a key figure going into the World Cup in 2027? I think that's something. We talked about Ali Sentnor. I think we both are very high on her. She's been fun to watch. Make her way into this team from the Utah Royals. Note about Lindsay Heaps. If you're like, who's Lindsay Heaps? That's Lindsay Horan. Her husband is Tyler Heaps, who is the sporting director of San Diego FC. And she's obviously a major part of this team. That midfield there. I like Lindsay, but feels like maybe the window is starting to close on her. Will it close before the World Cup is a big question. So Hutton, Jaden Shaw, obviously, who has 24 caps already, but still feels pretty new, maybe has a chance. Lily Johannes is the teenager from Ajax. She did get a little bit of a run in the She Believes Cup, and we'll see if she gets more time on the field in this tournament. I mean, in these friendlies, excuse me.
Yeah, your point about Lindsay Heaps, formerly Lindsay Horan. Do you think that replacing her will be kind of like as uncomfortable as replacing Julie Earps was in the midfield? Because I mean, she was just the anchor there, and every time that she was kind of moved on, they had a hard time. Do you think
No,
Lindsay
Julie
Horan
Julie
Sheeps
Ertz.
has that sort of weight
No,
to her?
Julie Ertz was a specific kind of player who played a specific kind of role. Julie Ertz, you want to compare? You want to parallel? Julie Ertz is the Julie Ertz is a player who, because of again, because of the role that she played in the team, it was very difficult to replace her. So think of Manchester City losing Rodri, right? That's the Julie Ertz comparison. When the U.S. lost Julie Ertz, didn't have her, that was like Manchester City losing Rodri. They just were a different team. They were so she was a safety blanket as a defensive midfielder. And obviously, over her career, played in a couple of different positions. But as a defensive midfielder, in particular, she was a cheat code in a way that nobody else could play that role. So that was, and I don't think Lindsay Heaves, because there are players here. There are players in the pool who are not included in this team through injury or whatever else reasons. I mean, timing, those kind of things. All of that stuff kind of comes to the table here. This is an opportunity for Emma Hayes to deepen the player pool. But Roosevelt's not in the midfield here. Now, maybe you think Roosevelt's time is coming to an end as well, like alongside Lindsay Heaps. Maybe that's what your thinking is. But we've been so used to seeing Roosevelt be the creative player in that midfield. Is it going to be interesting to see her be replaced by a Jaden Shaw or someone like that? Sam Coffey, Corbin Albert, more of your defensive midfield, holding midfielder options. So again, some wrinkles here that should make this intriguing.
Looking at absentees, it should be noted that the $1 million player is not here. Naomi Girma, still injured, has only played 59 minutes for Chelsea, injured in her debut after that record-breaking signing. And, since she was the standout light of the last World Cup, obviously a huge part of the Olympic winning team, got that, record-breaking move, unable to really make a mark due to injury there. Is there any players in here that you're like, I really want to see how they're doing? To be honest, in my opinion, Macario. I want to see what she looks like, because there was a big gap between, seeing her, and I was actually surprised. Maybe it's just working back into fitness or the injuries had an effect, but Macario didn't quite seem like her previous first run with the national team. She just seemed to have the pop and acceleration and athleticism on a whole nother level. Didn't quite seem that way when we saw her in She Believes. Is that me just kind of having selective memory, or did you see something like that too?
Oh no, I mean, whether she is everything she was going to be before injury, I think is unclear. I think she's probably still talented enough to be in this pool, and we shall see. Listed as a forward, how will she play? She's played in midfield too. And, what we saw with Yunus Musa, you can be listed in a player group, in a position group, and have it not necessarily mean a whole lot. That's why I didn't get too excited about that thing. I mean, obviously this forward group is a forward group in a 3-forward system with a center forward and two wider players, as is very modern, right? Trinity Rodman unlikely to play through the middle most of the time. Ashley Hatch would. I'm curious about Michelle Cooper and what she can bring to the table. Again, new face, only 2 caps, player out of Michigan who went to Duke and has been a pro for just a couple years, so 22 years old, right? We're starting to get adjusted to the idea that there are going to be teenagers in the U.S. women's national team, like a Lily Johannes, right? Like, these players are achingly young by women's soccer standards, at least for us. And the rest of the world has kind of already done that work. I mean, Alyssa Thompson just became 20, just turned 20 years old not that long ago. But there will be players who play college soccer and then become pros and are still pretty new pros when Emma Hayes taps them on the shoulder and says, "Come play for the U.S. Women's National Team."
United States women's national team return to action April 5th and then again April 8th against Brazil. If you have not hit the subscribe button yet, gang, do so now. MK Ultras, we're growing. Morning Kick Around on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button and tell your friends and folks to do so too. We are working our way towards 5,000 subscribers, so help us get there. Follow along on social media at mkickaround on X, Instagram, and the Blue Sky. Or write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com. And if you're able to help us grow, money helps, and you can do so at Ko-Fi or coffee.com/morningkickaround. Something one time, something regularly scheduled, small or big, everything helps keep this sustainable and help us grow Morning Kick Around. All right, after a very brief break, we're going to come back with Jason's interview with Dan Vaughn from Protagonist Soccer in a brand new segment called Soccer Disruptors here on Morning Kick Around.
All right, here we go. We're back on Morning Kick Around. Jason, getting a chance to talk to Dan Vaughn from Protagonist Soccer, a guy that I've run into many times over the years, talking about the state of the game in America. Dan, welcome to the show. Thank you for making some time.
Jason, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
We were joking that it looks like we have one wall behind us. We're just in two different locations. It's a good look. It's a good
Thank
look,
you.
the scarves. And I know you've got an eclectic collection like I do. And I know some of that probably comes from what you cover at Protagonist Soccer. So let's start with that. Sort of give me, if you want to do a brief sketch on your origin story and tell me where you come from in terms of soccer and why you talk about what you do, and then what Protagonist Soccer is trying to achieve in American soccer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like a lot of people, I was introduced to soccer in the United States through watching the Saturday stuff on Fox. I watched a lot of Manchester United. It's why I'm a Manchester United fan to this day, which not a good time to be a Manchester United fan, but that's okay. It was better back then. And then sort of moved that fandom into actually ran an MLS podcast for a little while from a long time ago. This is maybe 10, 12 years ago. I started MLS podcast. And then after a couple of years, and it was through the Open Cup, I discovered that there were other layers of soccer that I was not aware of. And those layers were getting no coverage. And I find underdog stories fun. Those interest me. My approach to journalism often is storytelling. I try to look for interesting people or interesting stories, interesting interconnected aspects of the game. And so I started following lower league soccer, from Division II all the way down to your local amateur regional leagues that are happening, even city leagues. And I had a background in journalism from college, and I really love that. Trying to expose things that maybe I thought were interesting, and that maybe if people found them, they could also find them interesting. And that's the approach we've taken with Protagonist Soccer over the last almost 10 years now. But it's an approach that we've taken focusing on the lower league game, the stories, the people, the players, because they don't get a lot of coverage in mainstream journalism. And it's a thing that's grown over time. I would say, if you ask me what my aims were at Protagonist Soccer, it's to broaden the story of soccer in the United States. Just a quick aside, I love soccer history too. The work of I have a guy that writes with me, Dan Creel, who does a lot of that. And I think it's interesting when you go back to like the 1920s and 1930s, and soccer in the United States was massive, but there's almost zero texture to it now. It's all become box scores, and there's not a lot of stories. We don't know a lot about that. Yeah. I want to prevent that from happening now with what's going on in soccer. I think that it's easy to go, oh, US Open Cup round 1, this team played, that's the score, let's move on. But like, the stories of the players that are playing and the ones that are grinding it out at lower leagues, I find that stuff interesting.
Yeah, I can see the appeal there, and I, again, not this is about you, but just because I think it's important for people to understand, how we connect. I've always at least in my later radio career, try to make an effort to cover some of those stories. So you are interesting in that regard because you're doing work that probably isn't as well known. You're covering teams and leagues that aren't well known. And I guess I would be curious. You said you were an MLS fan, or you had an MLS podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You see all these stories that aren't getting covered. Did you find yourself, and we've already talked off air about being younger men, did you find yourself, I'm going to use a loaded word here, Dad, and if you are offended by this word, feel free to call me out. Were you radicalized in any particular way?
Listen, I think that my own personal politics probably blends into my view of soccer as well. I'm a very pro democracy, grassroots democracy kind of person. And I think that when you see things like that, and then you see the imbalances when it comes to the finances and the investment that's going on at the top level and how little of that is happening at the lower leagues, I think it's easy to want to be a revolutionary. And I certainly took that approach in the beginning and wanted to burn bridges and was very critical of, the Don Garber MLS type and was, I think when I first started, I was very... I went from, again, doing an MLS podcast to sort of like, I hated MLS and didn't want to talk about it and was highly critical of it. And I would say I still am.
Sure.
I don't like a lot of the aspects of the game that it feels like MLS is pushing it towards. But I've also learned over time that making friends and having open conversation about things that we disagree on is actually a good thing. It helps me person broaden my perspective. I would say, man, how could you be a fan of Austin FC and Anthony Precourt? How could you be a fan of that? And the reality is that there are people that live in Austin or have ties to Austin that they see that as their local club. And local soccer is something that's certainly something we would promote.
Well, it's also there's and this will become more of a meta conversation about the state of conversation in American soccer, who we are, where we come from, and sort of how we view things. To me, that we are, and I've been this person too on some level at times about maybe in different particular tranches of American soccer, but it becomes a gatekeeping problem, right?
Sure.
It becomes this thing of, you're not the right kind of fan, or you don't like the right kind of soccer, or the way you engage with the game is not the way I think people should engage with the game. And then we get extremely judgy, and then we have fights on whatever social media platform we're on in that particular moment. Is that a fair way to describe sort of where we're at?
I think that people, have been shaped by the conversations I've had in social media over the last 15 years, as social media has become sort of, it's been the conduit that a lot of people are having conversations. And social media, because we're limited in characters and because it's a public discussion as compared to a one-on-one discussion, oftentimes degenerates into trying to own each other and to troll each other. And because that gets the most likes, right? That gets the best reactions because people are like, yeah, you told him. And the reality is it's not really pushing the conversation forward very far. And generally, it's just kind of forcing people more into their own tribes as compared to opening the conversation and maybe finding solutions to move things forward.
Yeah, I think, again, from my perspective, I worked extremely hard to get to where I am. I very much like you, found something I was passionate about, started making something. And through some luck, but also, look, I'm going to say, because I have an ego, some talent, I managed to put myself in a position where, I had something of a platform, or at least I was making a living talking about soccer in America, which I do not take for granted, right? that I have an opportunity to do that. There was a time, and I don't remember specifically us interacting, Dan, although there was, it's all very murky and cloudy for me, but there was a time when
That's good for me here.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying I comported myself in the best manner at all times either, okay? I'm not pretending to be a saint. I'm just, there was a time when it felt like, and again, I'm not trying to make this about me, I'm just trying to, I only have my perspective here. There was a time when it felt like it was this idea of, well, you're the establishment, or because you get paid to talk about soccer, or maybe write about it for ESPN or whoever, then you are the bad guy by default because you are part of a machine that supports, in this case, Major League Soccer. And I definitely think that there is a problem we have with this division that happens with, it's not amateur because USL, has its proponents. You certainly cover that. It's more of, it's more, again, it's sort of MLS, or what is seen as the billionaire playground, which wasn't 15 years ago, let's be clear. And then the sort of grassroots, you described it as grassroots. And sometimes I think that's an erroneous distinction to begin with, but do you think that that's part of where we're at too?
I think that you have to draw the line somewhere, right? And I think we're encouraged to draw lines. We're encouraged to draw up battle lines and connect with the people that agree with us and hate the people that we don't agree with. But I also think that there's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot, like you were talking about, like MLS wasn't always what it is now, and it doesn't mean that's what it will be forever. And I also think that we're seeing changes in USL that are going to lead to different kinds of levels of investment coming too, that we may see some changes there too. So I think that it's complicated, and it's something that changes. And if we're not willing to change, we end up turning into, I don't know, we turn into bots, right? We turn to troll bots, repeating the same lines over and over again.
I mean, a lot of this is a function of the fact that, you talked about history and talking about American soccer history that has been lost. And we have a feature on this show that we haven't done in a while called Memory Hole. And it does feel as though it's really hard to get a grasp on your soccer history because it's a skipping stone across the pond. And we haven't had these long periods. Our clubs have all changed, died, maybe come back in different forms and all that stuff. And it's really tough to hold on to. I mean, I'm a person who grew up caring very much about baseball, and I can tell you what year Ted Williams hit 406. I can tell you Joe DiMaggio 56-game hitting streak. I can talk about things that happened 50 years before I was born in cases, but I don't know how soccer was in that time frame because it doesn't connect directly to what we have. I think it's fascinating. I do want, before we run out of time with you, I do want to talk about a couple of things that are happening out there. Sure. How are you covering the USL announcement about the first division and promotion relegation?
I think that it's generating a lot of excitement in the level like we cover at Protagonist Soccer. We dip into championship coverage, and certainly we cover League One and USL League Two, which technically USL League Two is not necessarily involved in that conversation yet. That's the amateur level of the USL pyramid. But it's exciting. I mean, I think that it's the first time that we're going to see this implemented in any real way in the United States. Certainly you can find promotion relegation in a lot of regional leagues. If you go to like the Bay State Soccer League or Buffalo District, like those are leagues that are like 7, 8, 9 layers deep, and they've got promotion relegation going on. But this is going to be the first time that we see it at a national level. I think that there's a lot of questions about what it means. And I think it's also important to remember that this is within a closed system. This is not actual true open system promotion relegation where a team could just enter in and play up. Reality is that this is within USL. These are already established teams within USL, and they'll be the ones that are participating in this. But exciting because it's a test case, right? It's going to give us the options. We're going to be able to see how this plays out. I think that as a fan, I'm curious how the fans are going to react. Is it going to be, if you see a team that's in the new league coming and just recently announced USL Premier League, if you see them playing in the Premier League for a season and then dip down to, say, Championship, or maybe in 2 years dip down into USL League One, how will that impact the tickets, the people that are showing up for these games? Because that's the real question. We love the idea of promotion. Most of us don't think about the realities of relegation.
Sure.
And I think that I think what's exciting, at least from what we've seen from the reporting that's come out, is that it appears that the owners within USL are dramatically, like we heard 90% was the number that we heard voted for this. That shows a level of progressive thinking on the part of USL owners that I think opens a door to a lot of things that we might see coming in the future, because they maybe have a vision that they could do something. They need to find a differentiator, a thing that makes them different from MLS, especially as they launch that D1 league. You need something to set yourself apart. You can't compete with the payroll and the already established fan bases that these clubs have. So you need to find something that makes you different. And promotion relegation applied at this scale is certainly different.
Are you convinced that this is definitely happening, or is it kind of an article of faith for you at the moment? I mean, look, they're saying it. I'm not saying they're
Sure.
not intentful. There are a lot of steps between now and then.
I think you're right. Right. And I will tell you that as a guy that's covered lower league soccer for a long time, USL has hinted at promotion relegation for as long as I've been doing this. But what I would say is that the establishment of League One, which happened about 6 years ago, and the announcement of whatever the Premier League is going to look like, which we still don't know what that really is going to look like, sort of, I mean, it feels like it's building towards that. Something I talked about just last night on a podcast is that what you need is a dream and a vision, and then you have to have the people that do the work to get it there. And USL feels like an organization, at least from the outside looking in, that they do have an idea of what they're moving towards, and we're seeing positive steps towards it. So I guess I'm hopeful, like, in believing in it. Again, we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how it's going to operate or how great it's going to be. But the fact that this is a league that's talking about this, pushing this, and it appears to be putting the building blocks together to make it happen, I think it gives a lot of reasons to be hopeful if you're a fan of promotion relegation.
Okay, at the risk of being accused of giving the Open Cup short shrift, let's do a minute or two on the Open Cup, Dan. I mean, we're past that first round stage, and give me a sense of where you think this is, because there are some positive things like amateur teams against professional teams. I think we like that. There's obviously the Major League Soccer participation and the level of that league that is a drain on the tournament.
Yeah, I think that as a guy, again, that's been around US Open Cup, and we always get fired up for those first rounds. It's the same thing as what's happening in March Madness, right? You want to see the underdog take a shot and maybe poke someone in the eye and maybe advance, and maybe we don't expect them to win it all, but we enjoy that. But as far as cup sets, we saw almost the exact same amount as we saw last year. We had 7 last year. We had 6 in this first round this year, and there's I think the one that everyone is looking forward to, and we were talking about this a little beforehand, is that we're going to see a matchup in round 2 of the 2 Chattanooga teams, and that is something that I think a lower league soccer fan could not be more excited about. This test, again, talking about the positives of USL, which we have, the negatives of USL, the territory rights, and a outside investor bought the territory rights in Chattanooga and established the Red Wolves in League One. And it has limited the growth of Chattanooga Football Club coming out of NISA. They had no place else to go other than MLS Next Pro. And there is some deep animosity in Chattanooga between these 2 football clubs. It's the kind of stuff that fans in England would love, or fans in Germany would love. Like, this is like 2 teams in the same city that are vying for fan support, for players. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I think any soccer fan would be excited about. I would say maybe the Chattanooga fans less excited about, but I would say from the outside, this is a super fun matchup that would only happen in the Open Cup. It's why the Open Cup is such an awesome competition. It gets all these people playing against each other that you just never see. Yeah. So I'm excited about that for round 2, but round 1 was great. And we got to see, everyone's favorite burrito club, El Farolito, moved up again. They're going to be on to the round 2. This is a team that gets it. And by the way, was the 2024 Protagonist Soccer Club of the Year, El Farolito. So we're fans of them as well.
Okay, awesome. That is fantastic. A nice snapshot there on your thoughts on the Open Cup. ProtagonistSoccer.com. Anything else you want to tell people before I let you go and get back to the family, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say that if you're a fan of soccer content focused on the lower leagues, he mentioned at ProtagonistSoccer.com. We also have on Spotify or anywhere else where you're getting podcasts. Protagonist Podcast is the feed for that. All of our podcasts run through that, and we are pushing hard on YouTube content. I mean, following the lead of great soccer minds like Jason Davis here. We're also doing a lot of our shows on our YouTube channel as well, Protagonist Soccer. So please, check it out. And Jason, thank you so much for having me on. Love what you're doing here, and it's nice to be able to talk about a part of soccer that maybe gets ignored a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. You're doing incredible work at Protagonist Soccer. Dan Vaughn, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much to Dan Vaughn from Protagonist Soccer for joining us here on the show. Great stuff connected to the end of that interview about the Open Cup. Big news as that was
break
rolling.
it? Oh,
Sure.
you got it. You got the news. Go for it, Robert.
The breaking news as that segment was rolling, all Open Cup matches are to stream live on Paramount Plus from the third round through to the final, and select matches airing on CBS Network and the Golazo Network for 25 and 26. So big news connected to the Open Cup and the coverage it's receiving. We'll probably dig into that a little bit more on Friday, but big development there. Open Cup getting a bigger stage. We're going to take a quick breath and come right back with today's big question here on Morning Kickaround. Big question here on Wednesday on Morning Kickaround. I'm Robert. He's Jason. One of the never-ending questions of where should Giovanni Reyna go took another turn as rumors surface out of Dortmund. So the big question is, what's the source of this Gio to Inter rumor, Jason?
Yeah, we're going to do a little forensic review on a soccer transfer rumor. And this obviously is a very important one to us because we're U.S. men's national team fans, and Gio Reyna is one of our bright young talents. He has not had a good time at Dortmund over the last couple seasons. He needs somewhere to play his soccer, so why wouldn't some other club be a better situation? So this is what we've got here. If you can see this, and let me move my cursor so it's there. Gio Reyna targeted by Italian giants looking for a boost in the American market. This is from BVB Buzz over on Fansided. So I want to make sure that this is clear. This is a fan website, or a website that is taking in information and writing it up. They're not doing any original reporting. And okay, fine, but it says there's that an Italian giant is looking at Gio Reyna. Should I get excited as an American soccer fan? Robert, are you excited by this headline? Are you encouraged at the possibility of Gio Reyna making a move to some Italian giant?
I feel like I've been following transfer rumors for 25 to 35 years, and I'm numb to fake news, so I take all of this with a grain of salt. But I'm interested to see what more is to be unfurled here.
Robert, can you role play for just a minute, for the purposes of this segment? I would
so Gio going. He's in a tough situation at Dortmund. He needs to go to another club. I'm desperate to know where he's going to land.
All right, yeah, I see a headline like this, and I think, great, Gio Reyna might have a new place to play. Let's scroll down. We got a big picture of Gio. Looking good in his U.S. men's national team shirt there. All right, let's read the lead. Let's look at this. It seems that AC Milan isn't the only team from Italy interested in Giovanni Reyna. And I will point out that rumors surfaced a couple months ago through some Milan-based source. I saw it over on X that AC Milan is interested in Gio Reyna. So far, nothing more on that. Just that one rumor, again, questionable as to whether there's any real fire where that smoke is puffing up. It says, in fact, AC Milan aren't even the only team in the city that are interested. Inter Milan blog Sempre Inter reports that Inter Milan is targeting certain U.S. players in hopes of bolstering market growth. Those two words together scare me already. Market growth. Abroad ahead of the FIFA Club World Cup. All right, so there's more here. It does kind of outline why Gio Reyna might be a target for a club like Inter. And by the way, Inter, the best team in Italy. I mean, that would be a big step for Gio Reyna to go to the best team in Italy. Would he even play? But we'll put that aside. Let's just continue to follow this rumor to see where it leads.
Can I jump in that jumping into the market because they want an American is falling into the gaps of all the American player naysayers over in Europe. That is why they say that Pulisic got transfers and all this stuff, is because it was just because he was American. They want to sell shirts. So this is kind of playing into that.
Yeah, but we've got a link here, right? So, okay, this is BVB Buzz. We think they're just pulling information from somewhere else. We don't know if it's real, but they included a link for us, so we can click on Sempre Inter and see what Sempre Inter says about this story. Oh, here we go. Inter Milan target 2 USMNT as part of strategy to boost. That's a double boost. Boost revenue and market
Fast and
growth.
Furious fan.
Again, I want clubs to want our players because they are good players and they can help them win soccer games. I am less enthusiastic about the idea of a player going anywhere because of revenue and market growth. However, it's a thing, right? Okay, fine. It's part of the modern game. Nobody is signed without at least some thought being given to how many shirts they can sell at a club. Let's read on from Sempre Inter, which is obviously in the business of covering Inter Milan. If anybody would know if there's real interest in Gio Reyna, I guess it would be Sempre Inter. Inter Milan are keen to tap into the USA market and could lure USWNT stars, including Giovanni Reyna, to support this strategy. According to Calcio Mercato, hold on, because there's a link there. That's a clue for us. We're like Blues Clues over here. Is that still a thing? People still do Blues Clues? I don't know. We got some clues. It says new ownership under Oak Tree, which, again, this is one of those. We got some big investment firm in charge of some famous club now, but they are prioritizing North and Central American market. This is sounding very familiar. The Friedkin Group and various other American-based groups are taking over European clubs and then going, we got to get more into the American market. It talks about the Club World Cup here in the United States this season and the 2026 World Cup. I will scroll a little bit. We got Gio in his Dortmund shirt there. And then another headline, double headline. Inter Milan plan to break into U.S. market and target USMNT star Gio Reyna. Star is doing a lot of work there. Not sure that's the word I would use for Gio Reyna right now. And then it mentions that Milan and Juve have already taken advantage of this strategy with several exciting signings. Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Tim Weah, Yunus Musa have boosted their visibility in the United States. I'd like to take a moment and pause here for a second and ask, how much more popular are AC Milan and Juventus in the United States because of their American players, Robert? I mean, we're not doing empirical data here, but I'm curious if you think there's been a big boost of interest in those Italian clubs because they have American players.
I would say marginal at best. I think there's more people maybe tuning into it, people like us talking about the league and those teams more than we would have if there wasn't an American there. But I'm trying to think if I've seen people, maybe a small handful of Pulisic AC Milan jerseys, perhaps. I think there's maybe more of an awareness of those teams, but I can't believe that there's been like a huge groundswell of like AC Milan's my team.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't think that this is. I'm watching more Serie A than I have in a very long time because of the American presence there. And I imagine
have you enjoyed that? Have you enjoyed that?
Yes, yeah. And I'm more educated about the Italian football than I maybe ever have been. So I guess if you extrapolate that and how many Jason Davises exist in America, then maybe they're right. Maybe there's and even some boost is better than no boost. Right? If you're not sure that you're really popular at all, I mean, there are Inter fans that live in the United States, don't get me wrong, but if you don't think you're really reaching the level you could, and every club is identifying markets to exploit, right? Clubs are opening offices in America in order to try to do this, then why wouldn't you? But I don't know that signing a player and potentially spending millions of euros on a player is the right way to do it. And if we use logic here, before I even continue the follow the clues of this rumor, if we use logic here, Gio Reyna may be relatively cheap, but there's a reason for that. Now, maybe you're hoping that he's relatively cheap and you're buying low on a player who really will come good. But as is being pointed out in the chat, Gio Reyna will be 23 this year. He's not a kid anymore. This is not a player in development. This is a player who should be meeting his potential if he's going to actually do that. And I think it's interesting that this story says that Gio Reyna's flamboyant nature has curtailed his progress at Borussia Dortmund. Is that a euphemism for he's an asshole? Like, what is that? I don't exactly know what that means.
I've seen a couple flashes of flamboyant play, but wouldn't we say he's probably more known for... I mean, that is a good thing. It's good to see some exciting players, but he's probably been known more for having maybe a cloudy disposition or even his familial interference with his
Well, I
business
just don't know
dealings.
the flamboyant the right word. Now, as I have said, all right, that you're looking to exploit new markets. As Scott is saying, pro soccer is a business first. It seems like some people, especially the left-leaning, forget that. I'm going to leave that part about the left-leaning aside, Scott. Don't think that has anything to do with this, but you do you. As for soccer being a business, absolutely, and we're recognizing that. But again, there are things that have to coincide. Is this a smart signing, not just so that they can exploit an American market potentially, although how popular is Gio Reyna in the United States is an important, relevant question. I don't think people know who he is because he hasn't done bleep. You know what I'm saying? There's not a lot to go on. It's not as though he's getting documentaries made about him over on Paramount Plus. Just pointing that out. Now, again, we're following the clues. This says that this all comes from Calcio Mercato, about a report about Oak Tree prioritizing. And I've got the English translation of some of that report over at Calcio Mercato, which is in Italian, right? It's in Italian. This story says nothing about Gio Reyna being a target of Inter Milan. Absolutely nothing. What it says is that, again, Oak Tree would like to exploit the American market or move into the American market, and then mentions a number of players that Inter Milan may have been interested in the past and could be interested in, and then brings in just a bunch of it. Just there's a name there. Look, it says this is translated, so it says John Reyna, which is not his name. His name is Giovanni Reyna, because Giovanni, of course, is an Italian name, and you translate it into doesn't matter. My point is they're just throwing stuff up against the wall. Right? We've got Fowler and Balogun, who obviously went to Monaco instead of landing anywhere else. Inter did try to sign Tanner Tessman. Maybe that was a move into the American market kind of thing, but he wanted to play. He didn't want to be a reserve. So he said no, and the agents asked for more money, and it never happened, and now he's in France, where he seems to be growing and getting called up to the U.S. men's national team. Ricardo Pepi. Look, if this was Inter Milan is interested in Ricardo Pepi to break into the American market, I would be like, okay, you know what? That kind of makes sense. And he's played well enough and scored enough goals at PSV Eindhoven that you can justify the soccer part of that. But right now, Gio Reyna, all I'm saying is maybe there's some world in which Inter Milan is interested in Gio Reyna. And maybe they see that as a move strategically to get into the American market. But this rumor, as written and as we have followed the clues and clicked on the links, basically you get to nothing at the end. It is just a bunch of nonsense. And that's how a lot of transfer rumors work, Rob. That's how they work.
Do you think BVB Buzz had like an agent in their ear, or maybe they're so sold into Dortmund that they're trying to create their own rumor mill to like try to get him sold off?
Well, I think what they do is they aggregate stories that mention Dortmund, and they saw that there was a report at Sempre Inter that there was some interest in American players, and Gio Reyna is an American player at Dortmund, and they just started adding two and two together, and it doesn't matter to BVB Buzz whether there's any real substance to the story. They're just trying to get clicks. They're just trying to add content. This is the content mill world that we live in, where it's not about whether this is a real story. It's 100% about whether or not people are going to be like, oh, Gio Reyna is a target of Inter? I'm clicking on this link. And now some of your interest means money for the website. That's it.
There's some folks in the chat throwing out some names, mostly mid-level tier teams in big leagues. And I think at the end of the day, you in the chat, and just the broader folks that are aware of Gio Reyna, who he is and what we feel he is capable of, basically just want to see more of him play, right?
Look, I'm at the point, okay, and I'm not saying this is my first choice, right? I'm not saying this, but in the discourse after the U.S. failure of the Nations League, some notable people in American soccer media have suggested that it would be better for some American soccer players to be the man, a central figure responsible for helping a team win in Major League Soccer, rather than be toiling on the bench or never playing or even being a role player or a support player in a club in Europe. Right now, I'm not going to make the argument that Weston McKennie would be better served to be playing for Chicago than Juve. I'm not making that argument. I'm not at that point. I don't know if that's homerism or boosterism or whatever. I don't think that's a good idea. But Gio Reyna, who can barely get in the team at Dortmund, who is now going through another manager who clearly is struggling, who may not last the season the way that it's gone for Dortmund recently. I don't know if they have the stomach to fire Niko Kovac after firing Sahin, but that's bad. If his options are sit there at Dortmund and do nothing and maybe get 10 minutes of garbage time, or come to Major League Soccer and be responsible for leading the attack in a team that's trying to win something, I would rather him be in MLS. It's not the best ideal situation, but it's better than what he's got going on right now.
We just want to see more of him, right? Yeah. Well,
yeah, and look, this is fair too, right? He's talented enough to play in the Bundesliga, just not a Champions League team. Now, by the way, talent is not Gio Reyna's issue. I'm not saying he's good enough for Dortmund or Bayern Munich or even Inter Milan. Talent, though, is not his issue. His issue seems to be attitude. His issue seems to be commitment. His issue, because if you look at the data that we have available, we just talked about, Weston McKennie is more likely than not going to convince Igor Tudor that he can play and he'll be in Juve's plans for the rest of the season and maybe into next year if Tudor's still around. But based on the data, it's the opposite for Gio Reyna. Every manager that has come into Dortmund, and the manager at Nottingham Forest, who was basically told, here's a guy that I represent by his agent and then failed to play him, have decided that Gio Reyna is not the guy they want in their team. That it can't just be about managers not liking Gio because he's American. It has to be about Gio. So this maybe he needs a better situation. Maybe he needs to feel more appreciated, and that's a lower level team in a top league in Europe. I don't know, but clearly something's wrong.
Coaches like players that help them reach their goals. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is our Wednesday edition of Morning Kickaround. I'm Rob. He's Jason. If you'd like to help us continue to grow this program, hit that subscribe button. We have surpassed, I think, 1,600 on our way to 2,500 and then 5,000. That's right, Luke. Hit the subscribe button. And you can follow us along on social media at mkickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, or write us a note, an email even, morningkickaround@gmail.com. And if you'd like to send in something else, what you got?
I wanted to mention, I don't have it available, but I think by Friday I will be able to show off my brand new jersey that is coming in the mail. St. Louis FC, the club that was basically killed off by the arrival of St. Louis City. Our listener Jim has sent that to me. The tracking says it's arriving today. I'm super excited. I'm going to show that off on Friday. So thank you to Jim.
I heard a certain USL2 team might be sending something from Southeast Michigan as well.
Ooh, nice. That's
so we
lovely.
shall see. A last little plug, guys. Financial support, ko-fi.com/morningkickaround.
Coffee. Buy us a coffee.
Buy us a coffee or a million coffees if you're that generous. Coffee.com/morningkickaround. And there's even a bonus segment over there for those who donate. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Plenty to talk about on Friday, and we'll see you then. And until then, everybody, please enjoy your soccer.